Welcome to Washington Today for Monday, December 22nd, 2025. I'm Gary Sterhoff. Thank you for joining us. President Trump is in Florida for the holidays after a busy week here at home and abroad. Yesterday, the Coast Guard seized another oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela. It's the second such vessel to be taken in the administration's growing military campaign against Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. And today, the president announced a new shipbuilding program. He also took questions from reporters. We'll hear what he had to say coming up. The release and redactions from Friday's release of the Justice Department's Jeffrey Epstein files continues to spark more questions and criticisms today. Lawmakers of both parties are unhappy with the level of redactions, while Democrats and other critics argue that heavy redactions are not in compliance with the law. The DOJ says it will release more files in the coming weeks, though the bipartisan law mandated that all files be released by last Friday. We'll play for you some of that reaction in just a minute. Now, the president spoke from his Mar-a-Lago home about this new shipbuilding initiative.
As Commander-in-Chief, it's my great honor to announce that I have approved a plan for the Navy to begin the construction of two brand new, very large, the largest we've ever built, battleships. You know, you used to build the Iowa, the Missouri, the Wisconsin, the Alabama, many others. We had big battleships. These are bigger, but they will have 100 times they'll be 100 times the force, the power, and there's never been anything like these ships. These have been under design consideration for a long time, and it started with me in my first term, because I said, why aren't we doing battleships like we used to? And these are the best in the world. They'll be the fastest, the biggest, and by far 100 times more powerful than any battleship ever built. So if you look at the Iowa, the Missouri, Wisconsin, Alabama, and others, but they were similar in size, some a little bit bigger than the others. But if you take the biggest one, it's 100 times more powerful. They're longer by a little bit, but and they're bigger. They're bigger ships, but they hold much more. They use the word lethality. Battleships are the largest, sturdiest, and most heavily armed vessel built specifically for naval combat. While America has built many new warships over the years, they've tended to be smaller and much smaller, and not conducive to where we are and where we're going, and peace through strength.
Also speaking at this afternoon's event, Navy Secretary John Phelan.
The future Trump-class battleship, the USS Defiant, will be the largest, deadliest, and most versatile and best-looking warship anywhere on the world's oceans. I want to thank the President for his vision to make this game-changing capability for the United States Navy. The Iowa was designed to go on the attack with the biggest guns, and that's exactly what will define the Trump-class battleships: offensive firepower from the biggest guns of our era. This ship isn't just to swat the arrows. It is going to reach out and kill the archers. And for the first time in generations, we'll have a new leg in America's nuclear deterrence, because the Trump-class battleship will carry the nuclear-armed, sea-launched cruise missile. Striking dominance isn't all that the Trump-class battleship brings to the fight at sea. It has the size and capacity to serve as a flagship for our fleet commanders, so that they can command and control naval forces far out to sea.
As you heard, they're calling this class Trump class. In a social media video posted Friday, Secretary Phelan said the goal for the new class is to have an American-designed, made by American ship launch in 2028. The Associated Press reports that this new class will be part of a larger vision to create a so-called Golden Fleet. And Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery, who is now a senior director at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies and familiar with the discussions, told the AP the announcement will include a new large subsurface combatant class of ship and as many as 50 support ships. Now, the president was also asked about Friday's release of the Epstein files.
What this whole thing is with Epstein is a way of trying to deflect from the tremendous success that the Republican Party has. Like, for instance, today we're building the biggest ships in the world, most powerful ships in the world, and they're asking me questions about Jeffrey Epstein. I thought that was finished. I believe they gave over 100,000 pages of documents, and there is tremendous backlash. It's an interesting question because a lot of people are very angry that pictures are being released of other people that really had nothing to do with Epstein, but they're in a picture with him because he was at a party, and you ruin the reputation of somebody. So a lot of people are very angry that this continues. A lot of Republicans are angry because of the fact that it's just used to deflect against a tremendous success. Look, we have $18 trillion coming into our country. We have, I believe, we're going to have the most successful economy in history. We inherited a mess. Now prices are coming way down. Gasoline is less than $2 in some states, $1.99, $1.97, $1.95 a gallon. $1.95. Think of that. A gallon. Nobody ever thought they'd see that. They don't want to talk about that. They want to talk about Epstein.
You can see all of the president's statement. Again, he spoke with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and Navy Secretary John Phelan. You can see all of this event at cspan.org and the C-SPAN Now mobile app. Now to reaction from the Justice Department's release of its files relating to Jeffrey Epstein. That happened on Friday. Today, the Epstein survivors released a statement. CBS News' Scott MacFarlane posted it in full. It says Friday's release was, quote, a fraction of the files, and what we received was riddled with abnormal and extreme redactions with no explanation. Their statement goes on to say it is alarming that the United States Department of Justice, the very agency tasked with upholding the law, has violated the law, both by withholding massive quantities of documents and by failing to redact survivor identities. Their statement also calls out the lack of ability to search within the files, which they say makes it impossible for survivors to find pertinent information to their cases. The New York Times reports that Assistant Attorney General Todd Blanche said that hundreds of agency lawyers had been scouring, quote, about 1 million or so pages of documents and redacting information about the victims. Here he is yesterday on Meet the Press.
Well, you're talking about protecting the victims. The law directed the Justice Department to, quote, release internal DOJ communications, including emails, memos, meeting notes concerning decisions to charge, not charge, investigate, or decline to investigate Epstein or his associates. That's the crux of what many of the victims or the survivors say they want to see. Why wasn't that information prioritized in the first release, Mr. Blanche?
Well, first of all, it was. And there are numerous documents released on Friday that address what you just quoted from the statute, that address internal communications within the Department of Justice and internal communications between law enforcement and the Department of Justice. But it's for the same reason. Because many of those internal communications talk about victims. Many of those internal back and forth between prosecutors and law enforcement talk about victims and their stories. And that has to be redacted. And by the way, everybody expects us to redact that. So the same complaints that we're hearing yesterday and even this morning from Democrats and from others screaming loudly from a hill about lack of production on Friday, imagine if we had released tons of information around victims. That would be the true crime. That would be the true wrong. And if anybody out there, I heard Congressman Raskin, the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee releasing statements accusing Attorney General Bondi, Director Patel, and myself of not doing our jobs. If they have an issue with me protecting victims, they know how to get a hold of me. But we're not going to stop doing it.
Well, let's talk about the redactions, which you raised. The Epstein Files Transparency Act prohibits redactions, quote, on the basis of embarrassment, reputational harm, or political sensitivity. Has anything been redacted on that basis?
Absolutely, positively not. And that's another trend that is just simply false. There were a number of photographs that were pulled down after being released on Friday. That's because a judge in New York has ordered us to listen to any victim or victim rights group if they have any concerns about the material that we're putting up. And so when we hear concerns, whether it's photographs of women that we do not believe are victims or we didn't have information to show that they were victims, but we learned that there are concerns, of course we're taking that photograph down and we're going to address it. If we need to redact faces or other information, we will, and then we'll put it back up. So we are in every way, shape, and form complying with this statute, which, by the way, is what President Trump has been asking us to do since before he was elected. There is nothing that he has to hide in the Epstein files. There never was. And even though there's repeated attempts by Democrats to paint him as being part of the Epstein saga, it's failing over and over again. And so you should not be surprised that the material that we released on Friday, or the material that we're going to release over the next couple of weeks, is exactly what the statute requires us to release, which is everything that we have from this case, with the exception of redacting personal information from victims and other statutes, privileges and things like that. Otherwise, everything's getting produced.
Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche on NBC News Meet the Press. Also reacting are the lead sponsors of the law Congress passed last month that requires DOJ to open its files. Here's Kentucky Republican Thomas Massie.
No, they're flouting the spirit and the letter of the law. It's very troubling, the posture that they've taken. And I won't be satisfied until the survivors are satisfied. I said in the hours leading up to this release that we will know if they are complying if they implicate any of the other criminals that are involved and the suspects that are involved, that the witnesses, the victims themselves have given to the FBI, and they've never been mentioned.
And California Democrat Ro Khanna.
The problem is this was a slap in the face of survivors. What do they want? They want to know who are the rich and powerful men who visited Epstein's rape island and covered up the abuse. And the key documents that our law basically said needed to be released, the 60-count indictment that actually implicates a lot of these people, and the prosecution memo were not released. It's not about the timeline. It's about the selective concealment.
Well, yet. Right? The Deputy Attorney General said there are more disclosures that will be made. You believe that they will not release that particular part? I mean, you did give them some leeway for redactions.
Well, first of all, the redactions were excessive, and even Harvard law professors who have looked at that have said you can't redact internal communications, you can't redact workforce product, and the courts are going to find that these were excessive. But my point, and I'm sure Congressman Massie can elaborate, is that we want the files out. So if our sounding the alarm on what is missing is going to help them get those files out, fine. But this shouldn't be a big document up. There's a pretty simple point. Who raped these young girls? Who covered it up? And why are they getting away with it?
California Democrat Ro Khanna and Kentucky Republican Thomas Massie, the lead sponsors on the law Congress passed last month requiring the DOJ to release its files related to Jeffrey Epstein, speaking yesterday on CBS News Face the Nation. And today, Representative Khanna writing on social media, we hear there will be another DOJ Epstein release this afternoon. Here's what Representative Massie, survivors, and I want. The FBI witness interviews, which names other men, the Epstein emails seized from his computer, the 60-count draft indictment, the 82-page prosecution memo. Representative Khanna goes on to say the DOJ must stop protecting rich and powerful men who are not charged or those who sabotage the prosecution. Also speaking out, House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries. He was on this week from ABC News.
And it does appear, of course, that this initial document release is inadequate. It falls short of what the law requires. Now, the statute requires the so-called Department of Justice at this moment within 15 days to provide a written explanation to Congress and to the American people as to why they've withheld certain documents. We expect that written justification should be transmitted within the next week or so, and then Congress can take it from there as it relates to determining why this non-compliance has occurred.
Your Democratic colleague, Ro Khanna, said that, that if the Justice Department is not in compliance, and he clearly believes that they are not, that there should be impeachment proceedings for Attorney General Pam Bondi. Do you think that's on the is that on the table?
Well, I think there needs to be a full and complete explanation and then a full and complete investigation as to why the document production has fallen short of what the law clearly required. And so the next step in the process is going to be that written justification to try to explain to Congress, to the survivors most importantly, and to the American people why things have apparently fallen short of what the statute requires in terms of turning everything over from the Department of Justice investigatory files.
And here's House Judiciary Committee Ranking Member Jamie Raskin. He was on CNN's State of the Union.
They've not shown any deference or respect for the victims at all, for the survivors of this nightmare. And it's all about covering up things that, for whatever reason, Donald Trump doesn't want to go public, either about himself, other members of his family, friends, Jeffrey Epstein, or just the social, business, cultural network that he was involved in for at least a decade, if not longer.
So do you think this actions that the Department of Justice are taking on this are specifically designed to protect Donald Trump?
Well, what else? I mean, that's their whole business model. In fact, they're trying to reorganize American constitutional jurisprudence and the rule of law around the idea that the entire executive branch serves one guy. That's the unitary executive theory, that this is all about serving whatever Donald Trump wants. So yeah, I can't imagine what other interests they have in mind.
And today, Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer announced he will introduce a resolution directing the Senate to take legal action against the Justice Department for, quote, its blatant disregard of the law in its refusal to release the complete Epstein files. The American people deserve full transparency, and Senate Democrats will use every tool at our disposal to ensure they get it. This administration cannot be allowed to hide the truth. That from a statement by Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer. And just one more note on this. You can see all of our content related to the Epstein files. That includes Friday's DOJ document release, also news conferences with survivors, members of Congress, what the president has said, along with links to House Oversight Committee, Republicans and Democrats, their releases as well. You can find it all at cspan.org/Epstein files. You're listening to Washington Today.
British historian Alexandra Churchill is no relation to the former prime minister. However, her new book is the history of the world at war 1914. Title, Ring of Fire. Alex Churchill is quick to tell you she is not an academic, but has a research master's degree in the Battle of the Somme. She's a self-starter who writes 3 times a week for Substack, co-hosts a podcast titled History Hack, appears on many documentaries, and is a participant in a history touring company in Great Britain. Her book is the story of ordinary people, she says, not those stalking the corridors of power.
Author Alexandra Churchill with her book Ring of Fire, A New History of the World at War, 1914. On this episode of Book Notes Plus with our host, Brian Lamb. Book Notes Plus is available wherever you get your podcasts and on the C-SPAN Now app.
Welcome back to Washington Today. From the Washington Post, a federal judge on Monday kept in place a temporary order prohibiting the Trump administration from re-detaining Kilmar Abrego Garcia. The Post writes, U.S. District Judge Paula Zinnes said she was concerned the administration might try to take Abrego back into custody, quote, in the middle of the night, before she could take steps to ensure due process in his case. The Post goes on to write, the rebuke marked another tense moment in a long-running legal showdown between the White House and the federal courts. Now, lawyers for Kilmar Abrego Garcia have said he is willing to leave the U.S. and go to Costa Rica. Here's Simon Sandoval Moschenberg speaking to reporters this afternoon outside the courthouse in Greenbelt, Maryland.
Yeah, I mean, the government keeps saying, and they even filed in their papers saying, look, he's complaining about detention, but he has the end of detention. It's in his power, right? He can self-deport. That's exactly what he's been trying to do for all this time, right? Is take Costa Rica up on its offer of refugee status, right? And so it was sort of bitterly ironic for the government. They say this in all their immigration cases, where an immigrant is challenging detention. They say, well, if you don't want to be detained, just deport yourself. But for them to say that in this case, where that's actually what he's trying to do, was quite bitterly ironic to read.
The Post reports that Kilmar Abrego Garcia's lawyers argue that his illegal deportation and his legal return to the U.S. have created fresh pathways for him to pursue legal residency, saying he could apply for asylum or a green card through his U.S. citizen wife. Judge Zinnes said the bar against his rearrest will remain in place against his lawyers until his lawyers and the government have each filed further legal briefs. That all from the Washington Post. From the Associated Press, the Trump administration has suspended leases for 5 large-scale offshore wind projects under construction along the East Coast today. They cited national security risks identified by the Pentagon. Here's Interior Secretary Doug Burgum this morning on Fox Business.
Well, today we're sending notifications to the 5 large offshore wind projects that are under construction that their leases will be suspended due to national security concerns. During this time of suspension, we'll work with the companies to try to find a mitigation. But we completed the work that President Trump has asked us to do. The Department of War has come back conclusively that the issues related to these large offshore wind programs create radar interference that creates a genuine risk for the U.S., particularly related to the where they are in proximity to our East Coast population centers.
The AP reports the suspension is effective immediately, and it's the latest step by the administration to hobble offshore wind in its push against renewable energy sources. It comes 2 weeks after a federal judge struck down President Trump's executive order blocking wind energy projects, calling it unlawful. That all from the Associated Press. Campaign 2026 news now, and Wyoming Republican Senator Cynthia Lummis announced she will not run for re-election next year. In a social media statement, she said, "Deciding not to run for re-election does represent a change of heart for me, but in the difficult, exhausting session weeks this fall, I've come to accept that I do not have 6 more years in me. I am a devout legislator, but I feel like a sprinter in a marathon. The energy required doesn't match up." Cynthia Lummis was first elected to the Senate in 2020. Before that, she served 4 terms as the state's sole member in the House of Representatives from 2009 to 2017. WyoFile.com reports that one of the people who could run for the seat includes current at-large Republican Representative Harriet Hageman. And this weekend, Turning Point USA held its annual America Fest event, and the Associated Press, writing about it, says some of the biggest names in conservative media took turns torching each other on the main stage, spending more time targeting right-wing rivals than their left-wing opponents. The feuds could ultimately define the boundaries of the Republican Party and determine the future of President Donald Trump's fractious coalition, which appears primed for more schisms in the months and years ahead. That from the Associated Press. Now, the event ended yesterday with a speech from Vice President J.D. Vance.
And when I say that I'm going to fight alongside of you, I mean all of you, each and every one. President Trump did not build the greatest coalition in politics by running his supporters through endless, self-defeating purity tests. He says, "Make America great again," because every American is invited. We don't care if you're white or black, rich or poor, young or old, rural or urban, controversial or a little bit boring, or somewhere in between. People of every faith come to our banner because they know that the America First movement will make their lives better, and they also know that the Democrats don't care about anything other than maybe transing their kids. So if you love America, if you want all of us to be richer, stronger, safer, and prouder, you have a home on this team.
The AP also noting that Vice President Vance, quote, declined to condemn extremism or define a boundary for the MAGA coalition, saying the movement should be open to anyone as long as they love America. Here's more from his speech.
But my friends, there is so much more to be done. And the people saying we need to be doing more, we need to be doing it faster, trust me, I hear you. Greatness awaits every single one of you in the America First movement we are building together, but we need your help to get there. Do you want more prosecutions? Great. So do we. Donald Trump and I have a list of better judges and prosecutors to enact swifter justice. So join us in the fight against the stupid Senate rules to stand in their way. Do you want faster deportations? So go to ice.gov/join. because we're building an army of patriots, and we need good people who care about the country to help us secure the border and do it even faster. Do you want rents to keep dropping and wages to keep rising as they have over the last few months? Then mobilize with us. Don't hand power back to the people who tanked the economy in the first place. Join the America First movement, and you will always have a place on our great team.
You can see all the Vice President's speech and all of our coverage from Turning Point USA this weekend at cspan.org and the C-SPAN Now mobile app. Now to Australia, and this from abc.net.au. Sydney's grieving Jewish community gathered at Bondi Beach on Sunday, just meters from where 15 people were gunned down a week earlier, in a solemn act of mournful defiance. Thousands of people turned out for the NSW Jewish Board of Deputies Community Vigil to honor the victims and survivors. At 6:47 p.m., 1 week to the minute after the accused father and son gunmen began firing on families gathered at Archer Park for an event celebrating the first night of Hanukkah, silence fell across the dusk gathering on the final night of the Festival of Lights. Somber tone was soon broken when Prime Minister Anthony Albanese was booed and heckled as he was introduced to the crowd. He attended the event. That all from Australia's ABC News. Prime Minister Albanese spoke about the event earlier today.
8 days ago, terrorists sought to divide our nation. They went to Bondi Beach to unleash mass murder against members of our Jewish community and to unleash the forces of hatred and anti-Semitism in our society. Last night, the Jewish community returned to Bondi, along with many thousands of other Australians, to show that unity will triumph over division. Love will triumph over hatred, and importantly, light will triumph over darkness. And that was the theme of the vigil, light over darkness. Emotions were raw, and a lot of people in the community are hurting and angry. And some of that anger was directed towards me, and I understand that. As Prime Minister, I feel the weight of responsibility for an atrocity that happened whilst I'm Prime Minister. And I'm sorry for what the Jewish community and our nation as a whole has experienced. The government will work every day to protect Jewish Australians, to protect the fundamental right as Australians that they have to be proud of who they are, to practice their faith, to educate their children, and to engage in Australian society in the fullest way possible. We're not going to let the ISIS-inspired terrorists win. We won't let them divide our society, and we'll get through this together. And today, my cabinet has met for the second time since this incident. As well, the National Security Committee met for the 9th time since this anti-Semitic terror attack. And we went through the legislation and the legislative measures that the government is considering and that we will now further consult with the community on to make sure that there's as broad an agreement as possible. We'll also, after that process, be consulting across the Parliament as well to make sure that this is indeed a time where we have what is needed, which is urgency and unity, not division and delay. Urgency and unity is what we need.
Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, and you heard him mention legislation that could include a package of bills. Australia's ABC News reports that the package could include tougher hate speech laws and a new law that quote criminalizes inciting hatred. Australian Attorney General Michelle Rowland told ABC News that the government will work with the country's Jewish community in developing the new laws. That all from ABC News in Australia. Reminder, you can find all of our coverage at C-SPAN Now and cspan.org. That's also where you can find this program as a podcast. And it's also on the C-SPAN Now mobile app and on YouTube. Just search Washington Today. And the C-SPAN networks are now available on Hulu Plus Live TV. To learn more, go to hulu.com/live TV. And if you want more on the stories that are shaping Washington every day, Get our daily email word for word. Just go to cspan.org/connect to subscribe. I'm Gary Sterhoff. Thanks a lot for listening today to Washington Today.
All this week, watch Washington Journal's Holiday Authors Week series, featuring live conversations with a new author each day. Coming up Tuesday morning, journalist and documentary filmmaker Tremaine Lee discusses his book, 1,000 Ways to Die, The True Cost of Violence in Black Life in America. Watch Authors Week live during Washington Journal, Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. Eastern on C-SPAN, C-SPAN Now, our free mobile app, or online at cspan.org.